Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Madhudeva Huti. Hare Krishna. Always a
Hare Krishna
pleasure to see
Prabhuji.
you. Hare Krishna Mukunda Lila
Amala Krishna
Prabhu.
Prabhu. Vanchagato Vishik Patita Patitana Pavana.
All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Ki jai. How are you? Everything okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay. We're
So
getting
Prabhuji,
ready for the big festival.
we made our tickets to come to Boston. So we are reaching on the 12th. Uh,
Oh,
September
good.
12th, we will
Wow.
be
Right
reaching.
on. Okay.
So we,
I'll probably be picking you up at the airport, but just let me know your schedule. I mean, I'm sure I'll be picking you up. Not 100% sure, but almost 100% sure.
we will reach you. We are so
Uh,
excited. We'll get your association and people to attend the festival.
yeah, send me the flight information and I'll pick you up at the airport. All right. Should I start reading now?
Yes, Prabhuji.
All right. This is picking up from last week. The devotees, they had rented a place in downtown in Hollywood on a very busy street, but they got kicked out of there like within a few days. They got kicked out and they didn't have another place to move to altogether. So they were all the different groups of devotees were staying in various places around Los Angeles, and they were meeting for Harinam during the day, and they were having meetings in the evening at different places where somebody would let them use their garage. And so they were just meeting like that. And so I'm going to start reading from there. Uh, Weeks went by. No one was able to find a new temple. The meetings in the brahmachari apartment were confined, and the neighbors complained about the kirtans and the mridanga playing. But often, while the devotees were out chanting downtown, they would meet someone who would allow them to use his garage for an evening, thus providing an opportunity for all the devotees to be together with Prabhupada. And this is a devotee named Srimati Dasi speaking. Tamal Krishna met a woman on Sankirtan who offered her garage for Srila Prabhupada to lecture in. It was in a nice neighborhood with a clean double garage. We cleaned it, put pictures over that.
Okay.
Jai Paul waited out front to give a blast on the conch shell as Srila Prabhupada arrived. We heard the conch shell and opened the garage door. As it raised from the bottom and swung slowly up to the ceiling, Srila Prabhupada stood there, small and dignified, waiting to enter. He walked in majestically. That's a word that's very frequently used to describe Prabhupada as regal or majestic, or words like that. And small and dignified, waiting to enter. He walked in majestically, Vyasasan, and struck the curiosity of. They all went home with magazines, prasadam, and a new experience to relate to their friends. Thus, Srila Prabhupada's preaching was going on. One night, while speaking at a garage meeting, Prabhupada described explicitly Krishna's abode, where houses are made of Chintamani stone and the trees are all desire trees. The inhabitants there, as well as the land and trees, all have spiritual forms and are full of bliss and knowledge. There, everyone serves Krishna, and Krishna reciprocates. On another night, Prabhupada spoke about the song Hari Hari. Prabhupada explained is lamenting his disqualifications and is begging for Krishna's mercy. Narottam Das Thakur laments that instead of worshipping Radha and Krishna, he has simply wasted his life in sense gratification. Prabhupada would often speak about Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan movement of chanting the holy names as the antidote for the ills of Kali Yuga. And that song by Narottam Das Thakur is lamenting that he hasn't served Krishna. Of course, he's a great pure devotee of Krishna, but he's and attain Krishna's nation more and more, and we are definitely attaining Krishna's association progressively, and we will go back home, back to Godhead. But Narottam Das Thakur is putting himself in the role and actually feeling like that. The great souls, they actually feel like they're not serving Krishna, which is an amazing thing. But anyway, he's definitely representing all the conditioned souls in the material world, especially those of us who are struggling to become pure servants of Krishna. Yeah. And that first part, Chintamani Prakarat Sadmashu Kalpavriksha Akshavateshu Srabhira Palyantam from the Brahma Samhita. Prabhupada quoted very, very frequently from the Brahma Samhita. And this verse describes Krishna's abode, where all the trees are desire trees and all the houses, everything is Chintamani. And so it's a spiritual abode. No birth, death, disease, or old age. Everyone is joyfully serving Krishna all the time. Everyone there is a pure devotee of Krishna. So anyway, there's everywhere in the world, there's some idea, definitely in every religious tradition, of a fantastic world, a heavenly planet where you can go to. And even in just ordinary folk literature from every country in the world, there's some idea of a wonderful place where there's no suffering, where everyone is happy. And of course, it's certainly there in our Vaishnava culture that Krishna lives in Vrindavan, and everyone there is pure devotee. No birth, death, disease, or old age. So, but the one thing about being a conditional is that you hear these stories, and people have some desire to believe them, and many people. But we're so used to living in a place of suffering. We've been here for so many millions of births and deaths that the conditioned soul, in a way, doesn't even really sort of believe that it's real. Oh yeah, especially devotees and followers of other religious tradition, there's a definite philosophy of heaven or Vaikuntha, Vrindavan, Goloka Vrindavan. It's a definite fact in our philosophy, our moment to moment understanding of Krishna. But as conditioned souls, conditioned souls have a hard time actually believing it. It seems so far off, and I don't know. Maybe it's not. Who knows? Maybe. So even in our own consciousness, we may wonder. So not wonder. We know it's a fact, but it's still, even to us, it seems far off sometimes. But it's not far off. It's very close to us. And as long as living in the society of devotees, we're actually living with Krishna in the spiritual world. Everyone in the temple is a great soul. Everyone is serving Krishna every day, like it's early morning there, and you're all up, you're all chanting japa, you're all going to see Krishna and Radharani and Krishna on the altar. You're all thinking about Krishna and worshiping Krishna and serving Krishna in various ways every day, all day, and at night you go to bed, and the next morning very early you're going to get up and do the exact same thing again and again and again and again. And so as long as we're living like this, we're living in the spiritual world, the associated spiritual world. It is Vrindavan. It is Mayapur. It is Jagannath Puri. Krishna and Radharani are on the altar right in front of us. We're living with Radharani and Krishna every day. If Krishna and Radharani are living here and we're living with them, then you're living in the spiritual world. So it's not far off, and our increased realization of Krishna's presence and living with Krishna in the spiritual world is not far off either. It's a reality to us, and it will increase every day, all year after year, decade after decade. It can do nothing but increase more. Okay, so I'll keep reading. The devotees always had questions. Madhudrisha asked how a brahmachari can channel his sex desire in serving Krishna. Vishnu Jana asked whether the spiritual master's mercy was the source of the bliss he was feeling. Tamal Krishna asked how Krishna could be both the father of everyone and the son of his devotee. And there were questions about what it was like to be a cow or tree in Krishna Loka, and whether the soul's rasa or serving relationship with Krishna could ever be changed. And Prabhupada questions at length. Devotees had so many questions. We should have questions. We should have questions about Krishna. Even if you don't ask our questions externally to our spiritual master or to a senior devotee, even if you never voice your question, if the question is there in your mind, then Krishna will find a way to answer it. You'll read something in one of Prabhupada's books that directly addresses your question or whatever it is that you're concerned about. And Krishna will arrange situations where question. Prabhupada complained. We would say, never mind that we have no place, we have no temple. Krishna has provided this garage, so we accept it. Although homeless in Los Angeles, the devotee's basic ingredient for devotional life remained intact. It was not uncommon by Indian standards, Prabhupada explained, for one's living situation to be unsettled. In India, he said, as many as 20 people might keep their belongings in a single room. They would come and go, taking whatever they needed from the room while living outside, sleeping next to the road. But in America, of course, such a life was impossible. And Prabhupada wrote in a letter, as far as it goes in Los Angeles, everything is going very nicely with the Sankirtan party, and soon we are expected to have a new temple location. When Prabhupada met the devotees in the evening, he would ask them, how many magazines did you distribute? How much money did you collect? By their good results and Prabhupada's pleasure, a feeling of high spirits prevailed. But one night, when they came visit mood, Dayananda. And then he turned indignantly from one devotee to another. What are you doing? The deities are in my apartment and you are all here. What are you to find a temple? Prabhupada, I was, but without fully hearing Narayan's reply or excuse, Prabhupada turned to Tamal Krishna. And you, did you find a temple? And one after another, he pinned down each devotee in the room. What did you do? The devotees felt Prabhupada's. Los Angeles be a place to worship the deity. That night he didn't lecture. So the disciples got the message. And there were about 40 devotees there living in separate locations. But they picked up on Prabhupada's mood pretty quickly. 3 days later, the devotees found a new temple, a one-story church with 3 large rooms. The first really nice piece of property the International Society for Krishna Consciousness had ever acquired. The church had been used by a Japanese Baptist nation and was located on La Cienega Boulevard in the middle of Los Angeles, in a neighborhood of brick buildings, stores, factories, and businesses. The wooden church stood on a little patch of grass. The rent was high, $500 a month. That was high back then. It's nothing now in the United States, but back then that was a lot. More than Prabhupada had ever paid for a piece of property. Although Prabhupada had acted non-committal when the landlord had shown him the place, afterward he told the devotees he wanted the place and they should get it. Question the high rent long enough. Here was a good get it. For Prabhupada, this new temple marked the beginning of a new era for the Krishna consciousness movement. He wrote to Kirtanananda Swami on December 8th, you will be glad to know that we have signed a lease for the new temple for the Los Angeles Center. It is a very large, fine chapel, and now there is a program being organized here to set up everything very nicely and invite many new people to participate in our program. Krishna has been very kind to grant studies, and now there are many efforts to be made to use it nicely. The rent is very high. In this establishment, it will surely have great future prospects. See, I'm going to skip down a little bit. Let's see. The devotees made plans for big Sunday festivals with puppet shows and theater performances. From their kirtans on the street, the Sankirtan devotees began regularly bringing guests to visit the new temple. And that's pretty much the main way. The main way is new people would come to the temple. That's how I came. The devotees would see many people would see the devotees out chanting on the street, the Sankirtan, and they were attracted. And devotees would always be like, "Oh, why don't you come back to the temple with us? Come back to the temple." They wouldn't just chant and leave. They were always preaching to the people there and invite people back. And oftentimes people would come to the temple or come later. The devotees would chant, would hand out cards and Back to Godhead magazines, and people were coming. Many, mostly young people, but not only young people, but mostly young people would come back to the temple. And they would have prasadam and chant and maybe wash some pots and maybe move into the temple very quickly. That's how ISKCON developed, and that's how it's still developing today. Still the same basic program. But Harinam Sankirtan is a prime method, primary method for attracting people to Krishna consciousness. Now the devotees planted 108 rose bushes on Prabhupada's request throughout the temple grounds. Within a short time, an altar was ready, and the devotees brought Lord Jagannath and Kartamishana. Now we will begin full-scale deity worship, Prabhupada said to some of the women. He talked of beginning something new in ISKCON, the daily offerings of prasadam to the deity and daily artis. This was 1968. So after 2 years, of course, they had Jagannath deities in the San Francisco temple. But there was no organized regular deity worship. But Prabhupada, of course, was looking forward to the day when all the temples would have full-scale deity. And it developed very quickly after they began it in Los Angeles. It developed very quickly all over the movement. As the Los Angeles devotee community grew and prospered in their new setting, Prabhupada gradually relinquished the management to his leading disciples. Even for outside speaking engagements, which were often late, he sent his disciples in his stead. He wanted to spend his time writing books at his apartment. He said he would go to the temple 3 nights a week and to the festival on Sundays, but otherwise he would be inactive. Only his servants and small Krishna in his apartment. By December 1968, Prabhupada was producing his books at double his normal rate. He was writing 2 books, Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the nectar of devotion. And both he considered essential to the foundation of the Krishna consciousness movement. Krishna book was a translation and commentary of the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, containing the stories of Krishna's pastimes. And Prabhupada wrote in a letter, as far as possible, I will require some artist who will paint pictures from the Bhagavad as I give him, but the artist must be very quick, or 3 pictures must be done every week. These pictures will be used for my new book, Krishna, which I will begin as soon as I get the assistance of a quick painter. The 10th canto contains 40 chapters about Krishna in Vrindavan and 50 chapters of Krishna in Dwarka. So our books will most likely have the first volume of the 40 chapters of Krishna in Vrindavan with 1 picture for each chapter. And Prabhupada was very, he wanted pictures, he wanted nice paintings. But he wanted to print it as quickly as possible. And he wasn't concerned about every little detail in the beginning. And his books came out very quickly. And ISKCON developed very quickly by Prabhupada's. One of the foundational principles of Krishna consciousness that Prabhupada employed from the very beginning was that just somehow or other get everyone to chant Hare Krishna. The rules and regulations can come later. As we know, we come to the temple, and now the rules are already established, and more or less devotees quickly. But in the beginning, in the United States, where nobody knew anything about spiritual rules or regulations, Prabhupada knew that the early disciples couldn't absorb everything or follow everything very quickly in the beginning. But if they just sincerely chanted Hare Krishna and became dedicated, sincere devotees, then gradually they would learn everything and they would become very first-class devotees. And that's what happened. That's the experience in ISKCON. And so Prabhupada wasn't so he wanted his books with the difference between the Krishna book that's out now, published now, and the Krishna book that was published in 1969. The artist paintings are so detailed and so developed, artistically developed. But I guarantee you that now the artists are not producing 2 or 3 paintings a week. They're probably painting one painting in the course of several months or a year. But in the beginning, Prabhupada wanted. And I had a good experience in Boston a long time ago. There was one, our GBC was visiting us. He was a sannyasi, and he just came into the temple room at after the evening arti, the Gaur arti, and he sat down, and there was on the Vyasasan, and he began chanting Jai Radha Madhava. And in the beginning, there was only like 2 or 3 devotees there for his class. But within 10 or 15 minutes, he was still chanting, and there were many devotees there, expert mridanga players, and it was very, very, not kirtan by long-time devotees. So he made a statement during the class. He said that Krishna consciousness is like this. You just start something, and it may be kind of only a couple devotees or a few devotees in the beginning, but if you just start something, you'll see that Krishna will send people and send all kinds of help in the form of Lakshmi and whatever uh, equipment you need to do the service. And so, of course, that's what Prabhupada did in the beginning. Krishna sent everything for him. So, and I've always seen that all through my time in Krishna consciousness, that if the sincere devotees just begin something, and over the course, it will develop very naturally by Krishna's arrangement. Many wonderful things will happen. It's a basic. You just have to get started and be determined and keep doing it, and it will develop. Okay, so I'm going to read a little more. It talks about the paragraph I'm skipping. Talks about the different paintings that Prabhupada wanted for the first volume of the Krishna book, Krishna being born and being taken to Vasudeva and to Ananda and Yashoda, Nanda Maharaj and Yashoda Mai in Vrindavan, and many different paintings. Prabhupada he knew exactly what he wanted, and his disciples followed exactly what he told them. Krishna book would be a summary study with and comment in this book than in his presentation of the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, which was the only canto that was out in that form at that time. But essentially, it was the same work. And you read the Krishna book, Prabhupada called it a summary study. And if you read it, you'll see that it follows exactly the verses in the 10th canto, but it's woven together with the purports in a very masterful, brilliant way by Prabhupada's transcendental intelligence. You can read it. It reads very smoothly as a story, but the whole Krishna conscious philosophy is mixed in with the verses from the Srimad Bhagavatam. So it's actually, the first time I read it, I was new to Krishna consciousness, and I was used to reading. I used to read a lot as a teenager, but like these novels by famous authors in the English language, of course, and the only language I know. And there would be very detailed descriptions. This person was feeling this, and that person was thinking that, and the detailed descriptions of everything, like analyzing every aspect of something, on and on for hundreds or thousands. And the first time, it's so apparently like simple. And I was thinking, oh, this is like and the paintings, of course, were very like innocent, not extremely developed artistically paintings, and of Krishna as a baby and his mother and father and Krishna killing demons. And I remember thinking while I was reading the Krishna book, I thought, oh, this is like a children's book. And that's what I thought in the beginning. Of course, now I read the same Krishna book 50 years later, and I can appreciate it as a wondrous, transcendental, incredible work by Prabhupada, a summary study of the most important Shastra in the Vedic tradition, the Amala Purana, the Srimad Bhagavatam. I can appreciate it a little bit now as the most exalted book available on the planet. But in the beginning, I was saying, well, it's a children's book. But I liked it, and I knew it was philosophical too. Anyways, we appreciate Prabhupada's books more and more as we progress in Krishna consciousness. But the Krishna book is a miraculous work of art by Prabhupada. And the Nectar of Devotion is in the same type of work. So he also called that a summary study of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu is one Sanskrit verse after another, but in Prabhupada's summary study, it's all in English, and the verses are mixed in with his purports in the same way of the Krishna book. These books are wonderful. The purpose, let's see, having set such an ambitious life's project as translating and commenting on the 18,000 verses of Srimad Bhagavatam, Prabhupada was uncertain he would live to complete it. But the most important part of Srimad Bhagavatam was the 10th canto, because it contained Krishna's transcendental pastimes on earth. Therefore, Prabhupada wanted to render it into English right away. To finish the first 9 cantos before beginning the 10th would take years, and Prabhupada didn't know how many years he would have. But his disciples should at least have all the 10th canto and to have Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan and Dwarka. He wanted us to hear it from him directly. He knew that if he didn't finish translating it before he left his body, he was anticipating that he might not. But his disciples and followers should hear Krishna's pastimes from him directly. The purpose of preparing this book, Prabhupada wrote in the introduction to Krishna book, is primarily to understand Krishna Katha, why they can become free from material bondage. Vyasadeva, the compiler of Srimad Bhagavatam, and Shukadev Goswami, the original speaker of Srimad Bhagavatam, had recommended Krishna Katha, hearing and speaking about Krishna to clear the heart of all illusion. The transcendental pastimes of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, were so powerful that simply by hearing, reading, and remembering them, a devotee would be transferred to the spiritual world. It's the most basic principle of Krishna consciousness is you don't have to you don't have to do anything to Krishna, the whole, and Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan. You don't do anything else ever in your life. And some people can't. Some people are in prison, or some people are crippled, can't do anything else. But if you can't do anything else except hear and chant and remember about Krishna. That's everything. And those simple things will take us back home, back to Godhead. Everything is based on hearing and chanting. Remember everything else. Prabhupada's normal working hours were in the early of this time of writing, but now he added a second writing period in the afternoon and began another book, The Nectar of Devotion, a summary study of Rupa Goswami's Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. This work contained the complete science of Bhakti Yoga. That's what how Prabhupada labeled or referred to the nectar of devotion. He called it, this is the complete science of Bhakti Yoga, as taught by Lord Chaitanya to Rupa Goswami 500 years ago. Prabhupada intended the nectar of devotion to be the law book. How much time is spent in devotion in this day and age? I myself don't spend enough time reading it, certainly. But Prabhupada considered the Nectar of Devotion a supremely important book. So I know everyone is reading the Srimad Bhagavatam and Chaitanya Charitamrita and Bhagavad Gita and so many books, but try not to neglect the reading of the Nectar of Devotion. At least give some time to it regularly. Prabhupada called it the law book for the members of the Krishna consciousness movement. The philosophical basis of Bhakti Yoga, how to practice devotional service, what the stages of devotional service were, or what its goal was, he could find the answers by reading the Nectar of Devotion. Specifically for devotees, the Nectar of Devotion would help solidify the Krishna consciousness movement in the Western countries where Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu was virtually unheard of. In the introduction to Nectar of Devotion, Prabhupada invoked auspiciousness upon his work. This is a quote from the introduction. Let his lordship's grace be on us so that there may not be any hindrance in the execution of this duty of writing, the Nectar of Devotion, impelled by his divine grace, Sri Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada. Yeah, Prabhupada talked about that a little. Then he quotes, let's see, no, this is from Satsvarup Maharaj. Material things, Rupa Goswami had stressed, should never be rejected when they can be used in the service of Krishna. Prabhupada applied this principle to his own situation and noted in one of the early chapters of the Nectar of Devotion, anything that can be utilized in advancing Krishna consciousness and devotional service can be used. For instance, we are using many machines for the advancement of our present Krishna consciousness movement. Machines like typewriters, dictaphones, tape recorders, microphones, and airplanes. Sometimes people ask us, why are you utilizing material products if you condemn the advancement of modern civilization? But actually, we do not condemn. We simply ask people to do whatever they are doing in Krishna consciousness. This is the same principle on which, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna advised Arjuna to utilize his fighting abilities in devotional service. Similarly, we are utilizing these machines for Krishna's service. With such sentiment for Krishna or Krishna consciousness, we can accept everything. If the typewriter can be utilized for advancing our Krishna consciousness movement, we must accept it. Similarly, the dictaphone or any other machine must be used. Of course, back then there was no computer or computers, but only the biggest companies had a computer that a computer that would fill a computer that had much less power than your phone would fill a room like the size of a factory, and and individuals didn't have computers. There was no personal computer. Of course, now we use computers, and Prabhupada, I'm sure, would have gladly done Zoom calls if they had Zoom when he was here. He would have used it. So we can use it, but all these things, Prabhupada used cars. Is one story of, Prabhupada would go be picked up in a fancy car at the airport, and the reporter would ask him, like, if you condemn material civilization, but you're supposed to be renounced, why do your disciples pick you up in a Rolls Royce? And Prabhupada, one time he said, Rolls Royce isn't good enough. It should be a Rolls Royce made of gold. He said, and then sometimes they criticize him, why do you ride in a car? And Prabhupada, one time he said, I'm the guru of the richest country in the world. Why shouldn't I have a car? Everyone in the United States has a car. Why shouldn't I have a car? Prabhupada was, anything can be used in Krishna's service, but we shouldn't, push the envelope too much and just get lots of things and loosely say that, oh, well, I'm using it in Krishna's service. We may be, or we might not really be using it in Krishna's service, or just using it a little bit in Krishna's service. We should actually be, diligent about applying the principle of using everything in Krishna's service, and not just use it as an excuse for getting different things. I gotta, it shouldn't take advantage of the principle and use it whimsically. But definitely, Prabhupada always emphasized that principle of using everything for Krishna. Yeah, one lady was talking to me today, and she's saying she's an Indian lady, very nice, grew up in a nice family, but she's relatively new to the temple and taking to the philosophy and the discipline of Krishna consciousness. But she's very nice, very sincere. But she's in her 30s and she has ambition for developing her work and getting married and having kids, and she's telling me what we hear in our. She comes to class every morning, and she's saying, "Well, the philosophy is that we shouldn't be attached." But I have these desires. I like my work, and I want to develop it, and I want to get married and have a family, and she was concerned that there was a disconnect between the two things, and there easily could be a disconnect if you don't keep your if you but for a devotee it's not hard to make your job or be Krishna, or maybe not make your job Krishna conscious. It's hard to go to work at some store or at Apple or some other corporation, and it's hard to make that Krishna conscious. But you can definitely be Krishna conscious while you're filling orders for Amazon, doing your job in a hospital, or whatever you're doing. You can definitely be Krishna conscious in that. So it's just that a devotee can be Krishna conscious in any circumstance. So she was relieved to hear that philosophy. She was concerned because we have some brahmacharis in the temple, and they sometimes give like heavy classes like that. We used when I was young in the temple, and there were young men, and we have a lot of young men and young women in the temple, and the brahmachari preaching was like really strong. Had a lot of heavy classes from temple president and visiting sannyasis, and would walk out of the class and be like, whoa, that was heavy. And I was like, what am I doing? And so she was, so we have some of those here a little bit now, not so much, but anyways, so she was in a little bit of anxiety about that. You don't have to be, we don't have to be, but we just have to be, really Krishna conscious about our Krishna consciousness. Have to not just be Krishna conscious in an offhand, casual way, but at work or at school or whatever doing. We have to be actually Krishna conscious, and then there's no problem. No problem. Let's read a little bit more. Let's see. Let's see. Oh, and this is yeah. Although Prabhupada's book writing was going well, the book production work by his disciples was not. Unpublished manuscripts piled up. Prabhupada anticipated he had few years left, and he wanted to publish as many books as possible. Krishna was empowering him to write 2 books simultaneously, but the difficulty in scaling books for publication, Prabhupada became frustrated. Macmillan Company had recently finished printing 1,500 hardbound copies and 35,000 paperback copies of Bhagavad Gita as it is. Although Macmillan Company had abridged the original Gita manuscript more than 50%, it was nevertheless a victory for the Krishna consciousness movement, the first authorized Parampara edition of Bhagavad Gita in the West. Although Macmillan Company would distribute Bhagavad Gita as it is in the bookstores, Prabhupada asked Brahmananda to order 5,000 copies for the suggested approach as many book reviewers as possible. This book was badly needed in today's godless civilization. Try for selling these books, Prabhupada wrote to the devotees in London. It shall be considered of the greatest service. So the original Bhagavad Gita as it is was all, there was no Sanskrit, there was no word by word translation, there was no Devanagari, there was it was just the English verses, and the purports were either very much abridged, or left out entirely. So it wasn't Prabhupada wasn't, he was very happy that it was published. It's still Bhagavad Gita as it is, but he really wanted the entire thing published and distributed. It didn't take long before it was, but the first book I ever got in the fall of 1970 was the original, the abridged copy of the Bhagavad Gita as it is. And that book, as soon as I read it, I knew I had to be a devotee. So all the potency is there, abridged or unabridged, or in the most simple small book, um, Perfection of Yoga, or Perfect Questions, Perfect Answers, or any of the small books. The complete potency is there to make anyone into a devotee. But Prabhupada wanted, of course, everything is unabridged Bhagavad Gita to be published. And it wasn't long before it was published by Macmillan, who was like the biggest publisher at the time in the United States. And Prabhupada, yeah, and so Prabhupada was, Prabhupada was writing his manuscripts and he wanted them published as soon as possible. But and his disciples, the early disciples in 66, 67, 68, 69, they knew he wanted them published, but they're all young men, young women, and nobody had any experience publishing, getting books published or selling books anywhere. And so they were, understandably, um, a little slow to really get into it, because they really didn't know how to do it. And but as time went on, they saw by Prabhupada's emphasizing it to them how badly Prabhupada wanted them to do it. So it wasn't very long before many of the leaders and many of the devotees started to take Prabhupada's desire like really seriously and learn how to do it and actually start doing it. But in the beginning, they were probably, I can imagine them thinking 18, 20, 25 years old, and they're thinking like, I don't know, how do you do that? And none of them were very experienced in the business world, or certainly not the publishing world or anything. But it wasn't long before they took it very seriously and started to do it. Okay, I think I'll stop now. Does anyone have anything anyone wants to say? You're welcome to anything.
Prabhuji, this Los
I'll
Angeles
just read
temple,
one
it
more
was,
paragraph, short paragraph. The Los Angeles Temple?
you can read the paragraph, then the last.
What, okay, it's just a short paragraph. With this most basic book now available, Prabhupada instructed his students to read at least one chapter a day and discuss it in class. If you can simply cram Bhagavad Gita, he wrote to Hamsaduta, then you will surely become a very good preacher. And in fact, to become a student of the Bhagavad Gita, of course, the Bhagavatam, of course, Chaitanya Charitamrita, of course, but if you just become a student of the Bhagavad Gita as it is, you'll never be at a loss in any preaching situation. You'll be able to answer any question or challenge that anyone can present to you. What were you saying, Mukund?
Prabhuji, I wanted to ask, so Los Angeles temple, was it started by the whole project was started by Dayanand Prabhu or Nana Prabhu that time? Who started it and who was leading it when Prabhupada went at this time, 1968?
Who was leading it at the time?
That
Well,
time?
I don't know really any details about it, but I mean, the first temple was started it was just in a householder's apartment. It was in like shortly after the San Francisco temple was started, probably in sometime in 67, or maybe, it must have been sometime in 67. It was started by a married couple named Dayananda and I forgot his wife's name, but yeah, they started the temple there. And within a year, there were 40 devotees in Los Angeles. And I guess that's where Tamal Krishna Brahmachari joined. And obviously he was one of the leaders from the very beginning. But I really don't know much of the history of the Los Angeles temple itself, aside from what I've read in the Prabhupada Leelamrita. Really don't know much about any place except Boston and New York a little bit.
Rohit, there are two questions in the chat, so I'll just read the questions.
All right, well, let's stop then.
One is, will you emphasize?
Say that again.
Yeah, the first question is, will you emphasize on systematic study of nectar of devotion? But it is often heard that even if we are reading NOD, and we should read only up to 19th chapter because beyond 19th chapter things go beyond our limits of conception. Should we read the whole book or only 19 chapters?
Well, Prabhupada never said that. He gave the nectar of devotion in the beginning, and he wanted all his disciples to nectar of devotion. He wanted all his disciples to read the whole Chaitamrita. In the beginning, devotees used to distribute cases and cases of nectar of devotion to anyone on the street or in the parking lots in Boston or anywhere in the United States. No, Prabhupada never said that. I mean, there's a lot of things I hear these days but definitely Prabhupada, he expected all his disciples and followers to read everything. He used to, when the Chaitanya Charitamrita came out, I mean, Prabhupada gave the Krishna book in the beginning, and that has Radharani and Krishna pastimes in Vrindavan. And more advanced than that. And, no, that didn't come from Prabhupada. Certainly not what I tell people. Anyway, I don't want to contradict anybody, especially I don't know, but that didn't come from Prabhupada.
Another question is, Prabhuji, there are dangers associated with using material things for Krishna. What are the steps one needs to take to ensure one is well prepared to offer material energy to Krishna and not get entangled ourselves?
Well, all the devotees are intelligent, mature people. I mean, not everyone is a grown up, but is like 25 or 30 or 40 years old. But the devotees, the young devotees, and when you're young, you tend to be a little wilder than when you get older. But all the devotees are intelligent. You just have to be thoughtful. Just think about things and all, and think about it seriously. Am I using it? Do I want this for a good Krishna conscious reason? Should I? But you just have to be things in a
Prabhuji, there is a
conscious
voice break.
way.
Can you say that again?
Use your,
There was a voice break. Can you say that again?
oh yeah, just have, yeah, the devotees, all the devotees are intelligent people, and you just have to think about things in a logical, mature way, and just think: do I actually want this to use in Krishna's service, and am I actually using it in Krishna's service? And then, like suppose you're married, right? And you have an apartment, you have kids, and it's not like every time a toy for your kid that it's going to be used in Krishna's service directly, but but you're raising your kids in Krishna consciousness and teaching them to chant Hare Krishna, and so you just have to be thoughtful. Like, do I actually want this for Krishna, or is my main motivation more like a desire for my own sense gratification? People are intelligent, and if you think about it, you can easily discern the difference. You have to be careful, but it's not like in the beginning. Like in the beginning, there was so little money that you had to really think. Do we really need this for preaching, or do we really need this thing, utensil or machine for the kitchen? Or do we really need it? There wasn't much money. Because now it's not uncommon for devotees to be pretty well off. Maybe not rich, but access to decent amounts of money, and you can buy things that you want. So you have to be, you just have to be thoughtful and think about it, and really just be thoughtful, be Krishna conscious. That's what I would say. Okay, let's stop now. Glories to
Thank
Srila
you,
Prabhupada.
Chris Savindra Prabhu, for blessing us with this divine appreciation. Allow the chanting three times. Haribo!
Haribol,
Haribol.
Haribol,
Haribo,
Haribol.
Haribo.
Savindra Prabhu ki jai.
Jai.
Prabhupada ki jai.
Prabhupada ki jai.
Yeah. Hare
Thank you so
Krishna.
much. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you so much.
Send me your flight information. I'll make plans to pick you up. Looking forward to seeing you here.
We are happy
Hare
to
Krishna.
serve you, Prabhu.
Hare
Get
Krishna.
your associate.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much.